And thank you for joining us as the Alaska CRE Today. This show is brought to you by Rikrland Media Productions. I'm your host, Phil Larson, Senior Partner at Rikrland Valuation Services. My co-host today is Alaskan economist and MAI designated Certified General Real Estate Appraiser, also designated as a Commercial Review Appraiser, and Senior Partner at Rikrland Valuation Services, Lydia Larson.
Hello.
Thank you. Each episode, we briefly discuss national and Alaskan economic trends while tying them into what we are seeing in the Alaskan commercial real estate market. If that was not enough, at the end, we tried to answer questions from our viewers or from within our practice. Believe it or not, a lot of people don't understand what exactly appraisers do or how we do it or why we do it. And we get a lot of questions. So sometimes they're entertaining and sometimes they're just interesting. And in either case, we will bring them to the show and try to answer them to the best of our ability as a public service to Alaskans and questionable people at large. Right. So Lydia, why don't you start us off with an explanation of what you are seeing in the national economic trends?
Well, nationally, according to Business Insider, Airbnb demand is expected to remain the same while supplies will increase as much as 9%. Current
supply of Airbnb
units. Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So current owners are cautioned that nightly rates may need to be lowered in order to achieve the same occupancy as they did in 2022.
Okay.
Now, I would say that this is mostly true where there's little to no government oversight of short-term rental properties. So there's a lot of areas in Alaska where communities are talking about implementing some regulations of short-term rentals.
I think the city of Palmer did. I'm not aware what exactly they passed. Do you know what they passed or?
They actually have a pretty comprehensive permitting process now, and there's multiple levels or types of permits now for short-term rentals. And I don't know all the details, but they are really looking at trying to get a hold of stabilizing the number of short-term rentals in the area.
Right. And when we say short-term rentals, we're talking VRBO, Airbnb, and then just the traditional B&B as well, right? It's a hospitality, so not a hotel.
Correct.
But the model of Airbnb style has been around in Alaska a long time. Mom and pop renting out rooms or cabins that they created. Alaskans have been doing that a very long time.
Yes, that's nothing new to Alaska, but the model of and the ease of the way of creating a short-term rental is changed.
Yeah, with the app and insurance and all sorts of things, it's really become popular. We used it quite a bit for a while in our travels around the state. But in lieu of hotels. Correct.
Yeah, and it is a secondary choice of short term, especially in Alaska. But it's remained outside of regulations of typical hotel and hospitality properties.
And that's interesting because Alaska is a very non-regulation state. We don't disclose our sales. We don't follow building codes. We very seldom like anyone telling us what to do. And outside of a couple of small pockets in Alaska, there's not a lot of people looking to make sure that anybody actually does build things to code or do things according to statutes or rules, correct?
Correct, yes. Yeah. So, you buyer beware situations for sure in Alaska.
And the Airbnb trend, and again, as I say Airbnb, what we mean is the short-term hospitality.
Short-term rentals, yes.
Short-term rentals, less than 30 days.
Less than 30 days, yes.
That's been a national trend for a while. It's been kind of the hot pocket thing that this younger generation can invest in real estate and start to build up a passive cash flowing business for themselves, right? It's become very popular.
It has, and there has been some setbacks to that recently. There's been some pushback on users claiming that cleaning fees are extravagant.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That owners are asking for them to come do chores as part of the rental agreement per se. You agree to sweep the floor, take out the trash, these kind of things.
You got to split the firewood or you're not going to get that coffee pod included.
Yeah, so there's been some pushback on the way that things are handled or generally the lack of consistency like you would see typically in a hotel. So we'll see how Airbnb adapts to that, as users are typically the ones that are pushing back on that.
So demand is not expected to increase as in customers.
Correct.
But the supply of Airbnbs is increasing.
Yes.
And 8% may seem like a small amount, but it's nearly 10% and that's significant.
Yeah, so into that, to the model in economics is supply increases, your price point comes down. So that's in order for like they're pointing out in this article, they're saying that, you expect that you're either going to have lower occupancy or you're going to have lower rental rate, nightly rates.
Right.
Which would be a decline if you were to look at it on a graph from last year.
Okay, well, that's an important trend, especially if you are invested in an Airbnb style of business yourself. It means you may have to rethink your profit margin and your model. And of course, is it even still going to work for you? So what about Alaskan-wise? What's in the news in Alaska? What's happening in the Alaska economy here?
Well, the state of Alaska just released their economic overview, and they are warning that the Alaska population is shrinking for another year.
Yeah, that's expected.
Sure.
That's what we're seeing.
There was a little bit of uptick from the 2020 blip there, but
a lot of people came home.
Yeah, a lot of people stayed in place.
Yeah.
So I think we're looking at now true numbers of decline of out-migration, as they call it, of people leaving Alaska, and especially the younger working population.
Right. The workers are leaving.
So this is concerning because on top of that, coupled with that, is the baby boomer age generation is reaching retirement age.
Yeah.
So this is affecting employment in Alaska.
Sure.
I would say this is also compounded from Alaska businesses now allowing virtual workers, so people to work outside of the state.
Yeah, interestingly, Alaskans really like working from outside the office. As you can imagine, this place is extremely beautiful. It's amazing. A story that you and I are both working on for a future episode is the impact of Elon Musk's Starlink internet, as that is finally unleashed in Alaska. It is gaining a foothold. We're going to find out the particular numbers, but it is available. It is being delivered. People are on Starlink now and starting to do business. And what that's going to do we've been warning some of our commercial office space clients to prepare for this and to make sure that they started to pivot in what they were offering. Because if an Alaskan is given the option to attend work from their motorhome along the Denali Highway, most of us would do it.
Yeah.
So
that's
that'll be in a future episode, and it ties into what you're talking about, commercial space.
Correct, yes. So that directly affects commercial space, specifically office space. And in the Anchorage market, there was only 21 sales of office properties last year, 2022.
21 sales the whole year.
The whole year. Now, if you were going to look at the active listings as of today, there's 33 active listings of office properties in Anchorage. So you can start to see here where the supply is increasing, demand is declining, right? So the days on market have also increased quite significantly. And there's been listing to sales ratios as low as 67%. So, I mean, we're seeing some markdowns, if you would.
Or would you say that so far sellers are just holding out? or buyers willing to pay their price?
In the office market, I think we're seeing more negotiations.
Yeah.
I'm seeing people who can come to the table with cash
Yes.
can, in particularly, secure a better rate,
So
price point.
Right. I noticed that there was a significant change in the amount of appraisals that were ordered for it. In these transactions, what we saw come through our office, a lot of getting quotes and then deciding to just either utilize cash or borrow below the threshold.
Sure. I mean, and then that's common. Typically, I think maybe we're seeing a little more of that recently.
Yeah.
In particular, though, the office space is much larger that's available. So we're seeing very large multi-tenant properties that are available, which typically are not traded, very rarely traded or sold because they're long-term investments.
And overall value of those is not below the threshold. But what we're seeing is people are moving their money out of the market and utilizing that money rather than borrowing higher amounts. And of course, with interest rates increasing towards the last half of last year and scheduled to continue to increase this year, we're going to see less people borrowing money from FDIC banks, more people working owner finance deals or borrowing against their own other investments, right? We're going to see some more creative financing.
Yes, I think we're starting to see that. That's very typical in the land purchases, but I think we'll probably start to see that trickle into the residential and commercial improved properties as well.
Okay. Well, that actually segues perfectly into the question for today's episode, which is, and I've kind of summarized this because we've heard it in multiple formats, but it was prompted again as I was walking into the office this morning. And the question is phrased like this. So follow with me here. I'm trying not to laugh too much because we hear this so often. We're not laughing at the person asking. It's just, this is a common question. So the question is this. She says, I have a 4-plex apartment unit that I've added a 5th unit to, and I'm now in the process of refinancing. I've been told that I must get an appraisal. Why do I have to get an appraisal from an appraiser, and why does it cost so much? So isn't that that is an interesting question. We actually hear it a lot. So it's somewhat funny to those in this industry. Why? What happens at that 5th unit?
Right. Well, that's something that most people probably don't even consider when you think about a 4-plex, and then then the next size up is a 5-plex, right? Another unit.
Right. Add another unit, more income.
Right.
Makes sense to me.
Yes, but that is a distinct delineation between a residential property and a commercial property.
Right. Very important.
Yes.
So now building code potentially changes. Fire code definitely changes.
Yes.
ADA codes can change depending on the unit types and location.
Correct.
There is it's a whole new ball game. You just took your residential property from 4 apartment units. When we say plexes, we mean apartments.
Yes.
So 4-unit apartments, whether they're attached or detached, doesn't matter. And you've added a 5th unit.
Right.
Congratulations. We love you as appraisers.
Yes.
Thank you for joining the commercial real estate world. That 5th unit just brought you into our world. And we are all too happy to add you to our client list. However, the second part of the question is, why does it cost so much? Well, I can solve this very quickly. One, the education and licensing required of a residential real estate appraiser versus a commercial real estate appraiser. Can you touch just ever so briefly on the differences there?
For one, the requirements of on-the-job experience are much higher for a commercial real estate or a general certified appraiser who can...
It's a little over double.
Yes, who can appraise any property.
Mm-hmm.
And as well as that, the education requirements, that's in classroom hours.
Coursework's undergrad versus grad.
Exactly. There is a degree requirement for the certified general.
In some states, there is for residential still.
There is, yes. But,
to be fair.
Yes. I mean, and there's obviously caveats to that, but Typically, though, a certified general appraiser is going to have a bit of college education and
on top of their undergrad degree.
Yes, and then as well as that, the examination that is you take to become certified.
Yeah,
is very different. Commercial properties involved income producing properties. This is a very distinct difference.
Sure.
So you have to have a very good grasp of income to a property and how that reflects and affects value.
And the residency / internship, where you essentially pay someone to learn half as much. What do we were just looking at this recently. It's 18 or 20 months for residential, and it's still 30 months for...
Yeah, it's 18 months now for a residential to be able to qualify to
take the test.
To take the test, yes. Yeah. And I believe it's now down to 24 months for...
Right.
For general certified.
Right. When I'm trying to explain this to the lay person that doesn't understand it, my family comes out of the medical world. I basically explain it that it is essentially you have a physician's assistant, as is very similar to a residential appraiser certified, as in they're not dumb, they're not uneducated, they know how to do a lot of things, and they're good at what they are able to do. But the commercial real estate appraiser is more along the lines of your advanced physicians. And once they've stepped into the designated MAI, AI-GRS, and other commercial designations through the Appraisal Institute, now you're talking brain surgeons. So, you don't go to the PA to get your brain surgery, your physician's assistant, unless you're going to the VA, right? So with that said, hire the right appraiser for the right job, right?
Yes.
There's other limitations to what a residential appraiser can do. There's dollar amounts, there's unit types, and there's complexities that are involved as well. Different lease type situations, right?
Yes.
Can come into unit also. If you've, leased some tied lands to build your residential cottage on a pier, it's probably not a residential situation.
Right. That's a more complex situation. You would want someone who's qualified to appraise that.
Right. We've done that. That's why I mentioned this, because we've actually done that one.
Yes. That's some unique situations we run into in Alaska.
Yeah. And so why does it cost so much? So one, the commercial real estate appraiser, his or herself has a vast amount more of licensing and education and continuing ed requirements and costs. And not to mention, of course, the more you're qualified to do, the more it costs to do it, correct? So our errors and omissions and general liability and all that stuff when everything goes wrong is quite expensive versus what you're limited in appraising to less than $1 million and only 4 units. Their insurance doesn't cost as much. So it costs more, but it's also more complex to do to begin with. So in this case, in a 5-unit apartment complex situation, how many hours would you say on average, and let's just exclude the getting there, because in Alaska that could be 20 seconds or 20 hours.
Sure.
So we'll exclude that. It could be a helicopter, it could be walk next door. It is all over the place in Alaska. So removing the cost of travel, removing other particulars like, stuff we'll go into in a second, actually, which people should consider. But how many hours would you say, just billable appraisal hours, would we put out of our office for you to do that job?
Say approximately 20 hours.
About 20 hours. Okay. And so that's about 5 business days to do the work on a typical job. So that's partly why it costs so much money. So we charge more than standard residential appraisers for the reasons we've explained. My understanding is, and again, so, this is as of January of 2023. What we see in our local area for residential appraisers to perform a residential standard cookie cutter 4-plex appraisal is about $1,000 to $1,200. That same unit for our firm starts at about $2,000 and is usually closer to $2,500. And again, once you add that 5th unit, now you're back up to the $3,500 or more. And adding a 6th unit actually doesn't make much of a difference. So if you're going to make 1, make 2. Yeah. I think we did this. We've done 6 plexes, 9 plexes, 12 plexes, 24, 100 and something. Of course, we did some big towers in Anchorage that were hundreds. They all have their own complexity.
They do.
And the point is, the reason why your bank is telling you that you have to get an appraisal from a licensed and appropriately qualified real estate appraiser, is that they don't want to lose their FDIC insurance. They want to go against their own banking federal and state statutes and internal codes and rules created by the board of their bank.
Right.
And with that said, they have to use the right one. So I hope that answers everybody's question. Did we capture it sufficiently? I mean, we've wrapped all the way around it. It's expensive because we're expensive. It's expensive because you took it from being residential and made it into commercial.
Right.
And on top of that, we don't know what kind of extra fees your bank isn't adding to the cost of the appraisal.
Yes.
Because that happens too. Residential appraising is a little different by a lot than commercial appraising. And that holds true within the banking system itself as well. They now potentially have extra people who have to have their hands on that process. And of course, all those people would like to have a paycheck. So,
right. And you can always ask. You
should ask
questions. Ask them questions. Ask them: are there additional fees? What is the bank fee? What are? Get a statement from them about what exactly it is that they're paying. You're paying for as part of this loan process.
You could do that in the residential world too. In fact, you should.
Yes.
There are recent rules that come down, I think most states, and that the appraiser will disclose what they are getting paid.
The Truth
so
in
that
Lending
you can
Act,
see the middle person, called an appraisal management company, what kind of fees did they add on to it? And on top of that, what kind of fees did your bank add on to it? All under the guise of an appraisal fee.
Right. In some states, appraisers are required to disclose what their fees are, but for that reason, because when the borrower gets this statement from the bank saying you owe all of these things for your having a loan processed, and you say, wait a minute, you can see where those fees went, and if you look when you get your copy of your appraisal in the residential world, you can see that what the appraiser charged you, and you'd be surprised that typically the appraiser's fee is a lot lower than some of the other fees that you're paying, including those middlemen.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We will see you on the next episode.
Goodbye.